Hello, Steve. Today is Friday, January the 10th, and let me be the first one to say that it's Friday. It's Friday. Gotta get down on Friday. For the running challenge, let me say that 10 miles would definitely be achievable this week, so challenge accepted. And who knows, maybe I'll go above and beyond for that. Today, I'm going to center around the two topics that you brought up last time, which ironically enough are the two main staples of the education system we currently have. So let's begin today with literacy and reading. I took it upon myself today to read the first chapter of A Tale of Two Cities, and let me say, the very first line of the book says pretty much everything you need to know. For anyone out there who hasn't read the book yet, I'm sure you're familiar with the opening line. It was the best of times, and it was the worst of times. And, amazingly enough, that's the exact way I felt reading it. On one hand, you can just see how well crafted and well written this book actually is. It certainly was the best of times in that way. And on the other side of things, it's actually so well written that it's impossible to understand what the heck is going on in this book. And it took me reading the back of the book, which explains what the book is about in general, to actually understand in a better way what the first chapter was probably referring to. I'll provide a sample excerpt from the second paragraph of the book to explain my point. There were a king with a large jaw, and a queen with a plain face on the throne of England. There were a king with a large jaw, and a queen with a fair face on the throne of France. In both countries it was clearer than crystal to the lords of the state, preservers of loaves and fishes, that things in general were settled forever. Now, I'm pretty sure I have an idea what that paragraph was about. It took me a lot to get to that stage, though. And what I believe that paragraph is trying to establish is the similarities and the differences between the way things are run in England and France at the time. So, I definitely believe I'm capable of understanding this book, but I think it would take a pretty big effort on my part. So let you advise, Steve, I'm going to put the book back on the shelf for now. That being said, I do plan on taking the book off the shelf at some point during the summer when I'm going to have a little bit more time available and maybe a little bit more comfort reading things. So, until I get to that point, I'm going to take upon your advice to start reading some easier texts to build some understanding and just get some enjoyment out of reading. I challenge myself to read one new book every month. I'll start by picking up and reading the Dexter book as you recommended. When I do end up taking A Tale of Two Cities back up off the shelf, I think you should join me in doing so. We could read it at the same pace, and you could give me coaching and advice on how to actually break down and understand what this book is trying to tell me, because I'm sure it would be a really rewarding experience. Now, on to the maths. For the problem of 5 times 18, you actually developed two completely different strategies, and I'm going to break down for you what those strategies actually are. The first one is known as using the distributive property. So what you did is you broke the number 18 into the numbers 10 plus 8, and then what you did is you did 5 times 8 and 5 times 10. This is actually known as distribution, and it's probably one of the strongest and most common ways of multiplying big numbers. The second one you did was really sneaky, and it's actually known as using the associative property. You broke 18 down into 9 times 2, and instead of doing the problem 5 times brackets 9 times 2, which is of course 18, you did 5 times 2, and that in brackets, and then multiplied that by 9. And that's actually known as the associativity. And your method is functionally equivalent to another method I like to use where you actually have one of the numbers and double the other one, turning a question like 5 times 18 into 10 times 9. And it works really well when you're multiplying a number by 5. I'll add in an overcounting strategy which also makes use of distribution, but this time with subtraction. What I'll do is I'm going to do 5 times 20, which would be 20 groups of 5, and then take away 2 groups of 5 at the end, which is equivalent to multiplying 5 by 20 minus 2, which in other words is 5 times 18. I feel like you'd be interested knowing that the students that fall behind in math are actually ones who don't develop strategies like the ones we're talking about. Most students view the problem in a very fixed and rigid way. What they do is they'll take the 18 and they'll put it at the top, they'll put the 5 at the bottom, and they'll do that stacked multiplication trick that gets you your answer. And while a procedure like that is important, the students who end up doing well in math typically play and experiment with things like numbers and get a lot of comfort with them because they're willing to try different ideas out. And what they're actually doing is they're not afraid to be wrong. And actually that's one of the ways you can become a lot stronger at math, is to be prepared to be wrong and make adjustments. Which is why ultimately you actually had success with your parabola problem. You did what any math teacher actually hopes the student would do with a problem like that. You were resourceful, you kept trying at it, you worked hard, and you were willing to take chances, which ultimately, you made some mistakes along the way, but that ultimately led you to the answer. And that's the point of low entry if it's done right. If you don't have a strong base of knowledge to connect to, you can actually jump in anyways and start to build that knowledge. Whereas on the other hand, a student who already has that strong base of knowledge might already be trying to do some complicated things, like finding where these two quadratics intersect each other, which is a tough and hard problem. I would like to say that I really like the question you came up with, and I don't feel it would benefit to add those to the resources for the following two reasons. First of all, it would turn the problem that we just did into one of those ones you see typically in the textbook, which, let's be honest, there's a lot of those already available. Determine the equation of a quadratic given a picture is a very common textbook question, and often they use word problems and stuff to give it more context. And second, it precludes you the opportunity from making up the question and context given the information. I mean, I wasn't even thinking about downward dog being a parabola until you brought it up. And part of this resource will ask students to actually make up their own question that would fit this information. But I'll explain more of that on Tuesday when I present my solution and also the full context of how I think this could be useful. Also, thanks a lot for the idea of like a murder mystery kind of challenge. For example, a hunt for the mysterious Mr. X. But I'll have more on that at a later time. For chess, my move is pawn from b2 to d2. I'll let you make of the move as you will. So, if you'll excuse me, I have some French toast to make. Bonsoir.